All right, hello everyone. I'm going to step away from the podium so we don't have any more weird noises coming from the sound system. How you guys doing? Happy hot day and afternoon. I'm glad you guys are all here. I know parking was difficult, so thank you guys for making it out. I'm really excited to be here. You guys just heard Winnie talk about this really cool app that her and her friends came up with. She's still in college. She's a senior in college. I'm still you're not even 21 yet, right? She's almost 21. That's crazy. I'm really excited that the San Diego Foundation decided to host such an event because there are a lot of us, there are just 3 of us today that are doing work and dedicating our careers to making the San Diego region and the different communities a better place, but there are tons of us that aren't represented in this room. So I would like to say that because there are people right now that are grinding, that are younger than us, organizers that are door knocking, canvassing, that aren't represented in this room today. So shout out to them, even though they're not here. You guys will hear from Nate really soon after me about Movement B, and he'll talk about empowering students to share their stories and their voice. And again, my name is Macy Olivas. As Bruna mentioned, I am the executive director of the Patricia and Christopher Weil Family Foundation, and the director of Christopher Weil and Company's Family Philanthropy Services. I say that proudly for 2 reasons. One, I work for a really cool family. And some of you guys know them. I see some partners in the room. I see some of our MKC scholarship recipients in the room. Shout out. I know they're hiding in the back, but I will call you out because you guys deserve to be given a shout out. One, I work for a really, really cool family that's dedicated to philanthropy, and I feel really honored to work with them on a daily basis. But 2, the Weil family and the Patricia and Christopher Weil Family Foundation hold a very special place in my heart because once upon a time I was one of their recipients. I often like to joke about the fact that when I first met the Weils, I was this 17-year-old awkward girl with braces, and some of that still hasn't changed. And now I get to work and be with them on a daily basis and learn from them. So I'm really excited to be here. This afternoon, I was particularly charged to talk about our scholarship gifting and talk about how scholarships can leave a significant impact in a community and a student's life. So more talking about the ripple effect. I'm going to be talking about the history of the Weil Family Foundation, the MKC scholarship, give you a little bit of a story about what made it to what it is today. And then I'm going to go into a little bit of our giving philosophy, and then move into how our dialogue has changed from just talking about charity work to talking about systemic changes. That's huge, right? Talking about charity work to changing that into talking about systemic changes. And I think that's a common thread that you'll hear in all of our speeches. Winnie just called it out, how it's not necessarily about the donor, but really about the work that's getting done. So I will go ahead and start with telling you guys a little bit about the Weil Family Foundation. I love this picture. I came across this picture when I was an intern at the Weil Family Foundation the summer after my senior year of college. And that is Mrs. Weil and Jackie, and I love that they're matching because it's the cutest thing in the world. I'll talk a little bit about Jackie and why this story, or why this picture, is up here. But I want to start off with talking about the Weil Family Foundation. So Mr. and Mrs. Weil started the Weil Family Foundation in 1999. And it was just the 2 of them. Both of them were the first in their family to graduate from college. They actually met at UCLA, but originally met when they were in middle school, which is really funny because I guess you could say they're middle school sweethearts, but they officially got together at UCLA and were married, and essentially supported each other through that whole process. Again, the first in their families to go to college, so they really just had each other to support each other. And so when they ended up, long story short, they ended up making a ton of money, and they never expected to make that much money. And their first conversation when they realized the magnitude of their wealth was, what are we going to do with it? And they answered that question pretty quickly. We're going to give it back to the community. They thought about the leaders, they thought about the teachers in their lives, they thought about the mentors who really played a significant role in getting them to where they are. And so they started the Patricia and Chistopher Weil Family Foundation. And they have donated to a lot of different areas. Some of you guys are in here that represent those specific organizations. But in 2005, the foundation took a little bit of a shift and became a little bit more specific in scholarship giving. Mr. and Mrs. Weil were in LA, moved to San Diego, and ironically moved to San Diego when a school called the Pro School UCSD was launched on UC San Diego's campus. And they have a lot of friends at UCSD, and they heard about the mission. They heard about low-income students being bused to this college campus. They were inspired. They became a part of the board for several years. Mrs. Weil just termed off. And again, if you guys know the Weils, they don't do anything halfway. If they're gonna commit, they're really gonna commit. So Mrs. Weil was on the board, she was in the classroom, she was doing professional development with the teachers, she was sitting down with the students, etc. And so was Mr. Weil. And so it's kind of organically became that she became a mentor at Preuss. And Jackie was her mentee. So she met Jackie when she was in 7th grade. So she's known Jackie since she was 12 years old. And they met weekly, sometimes bi-weekly, and it flourished into this beautiful relationship that still follows them today. And when Jackie became a senior in college, a senior at Preuss, the discussion became, well, we want to help Jackie pay for college. We would love to give her a scholarship. How can we do that through our foundation? Well, you can't. You can't just give someone money, right? There has to be a competitive process. There are logistics, IRS, you know. And so they decided to interview a bunch of students at Preuss, and their thought process was like, oh, we'll just give Jackie the scholarship, we'll interview them. And that didn't happen, of course. Mr. Weil always chuckles about how when you meet the students, it's hard because you hear their stories, you hear what's going on, you hear about their families. It's a really emotional thing, right, to talk to a student about what's going on in their lives, especially these students who are, again, first-generation college students, all low income, they all have their own obstacles, their families are all facing different things. So they went in with the intention of giving one scholarship. They gave 16 that year. 16 in 2005. And now these students, the first round, are all 27, 28 years old, have families, are homeowners, have their PhDs. It's crazy. I love getting emails from them because we're like, oh, you have a new baby, and oh, what a beautiful house. And Mr. and Mrs. Weil are the first people that they email because they were such a critical part of that process. And so Jackie in particular, Jackie graduated from UCSD. She went on to get her master's at NYU in public health, which is great. She's still in New York. She works for a nonprofit out there that focuses specifically on affordable housing. And she, again, is still in contact with the Weils. They correspond on a weekly basis. Every time the Weils are out there in New York, they see her every time she's in San Diego. She makes a point to come see them. It's a beautiful relationship that flourished a long time ago. And so I share the story about Jackie specifically because it highlights the power of relationships. The power of relationships, right? She was the start of this scholarship. And I want to emphasize that today in particular because that really is the cornerstone of the Weil Family Foundation. We believe at the Weil Family Foundation that relationships are essential for college retention and college success. And so we try our very hardest to be a constant in our students' lives. And we do that via different vehicles, and I'll go specifically into that later. But I want to give you guys a little bit of numbers. This is actually our senior class. All these students up here are seniors in college, so they will be walking across the stage, the graduation stage in May and June, and that's when they were 17 years old with the Weils. And so, as I mentioned, the Weils started giving scholarships in 2005. Since then, they've given scholarships to 224 students. 224 students to the excess of $2 million. Again, they only wanted to give one to Jackie, and they ended up giving to 224 students, I being one, and now are at $2 million in scholarship giving, and that is not going to slow down. I actually had a conversation with one of our board members this morning about how we need to figure out how to get some more people on staff to figure out how we can best support our scholars. And so some more stats. Specifically on this campus at SDSU, we have 34 students that have gone through this university. 34, right? 25 in total. Oh, excuse me. 12 right now are students right now, undergraduate students. And we have 2 in the back. We have Alexis and Khalid. Can you guys raise your hands? I told you I was going to shout you out because I'm so glad you guys are here. And we have 1 student who is in the master's program right now. And so as these students have begun to graduate, they have gone on and gotten their PhDs and their masters. And so the Wheels decided to start a graduate grant. And so that started in 2009, and now we have 26 people who have gone through that process and have welcomed 6 more students in that. And they're all varying in their degrees. Some of them are in med school, some of them are getting their PhDs. I have a couple of other stats, but for the sake of time, I will not share them. So if you're interested, email me. So you must be wondering, how the heck do we manage all these relationships with 224 students? That's a lot. And like I said, knowing the Wheels, they don't just give, they invest their time, they invest their energy. And so I have outlined a couple of points for you guys that we specifically value at the Weil Family Foundation. One is that we let them know that we're there and we keep that door open. So from the moment, and the 2 people in the back can support this, from the moment that they enter our interview, we say we want a relationship with you, and we really put that out there. Full transparency, here are our emails, here are our contacts, all access to us. And some of them take advantage of it and some of them don't. But we leave that door open and we're constantly nudging and saying, hey, we're here for you, hey, we support you. So that's a big part of it. 2, we're intent about our communication. We communicate constantly via text, via phone. It depends on the student. We know where we can reach you, what number you need to be reached at. Sometimes we need to call your mom before we call you. We know all of that. Sometimes the students hate it, sometimes they don't. Whatever, we get them to where they need to be. And again, our end goal is that we help them make it to the graduation stage at the end of it. So we do whatever we have to do to make sure that they get there. 3 is that we leverage. That's a big thing. We leverage our own social capital, our own time. All our networks, we always say, are their networks. And we try our best to constantly make those connections for students. We meet someone that is working in the field that they're working in. Hey, do you need an intern? We know someone great. Here's their resume. Here's their phone number. And so we're constantly doing that, of course, with the permission of our students, but they're not always going to turn down an internship. So that's a big thing, is we consider our contacts their contacts. And sometimes it's a great teachable moment, right? These kids are 17, 18, 19. Some of them know how to manage those relationships and respond quickly, some don't. If they don't, then we have a conversation about why you need to answer in 24 hours. And what are some professional guidelines. So we always try our best. If something doesn't go the way that we think it's gonna go, we use it as a teachable moment. 4, we let them into our own lives. That's a big thing, right? We ask them to spill their stories, share their lives. We do the very same thing. We are very transparent about what's going on in our lives, and each of us, there are 6 of us, each of us have our own stories, our own journeys, like all of us in this room, and so we're very transparent about that with our students. My particular story, and where I connect with a lot of students, is that I'm also a first-gen student. I went to school out of state. I come from a family that works blue-collar jobs. Those are my connections with the students, and everyone has their own, and so we constantly try to find those connection points. And 5, we listen to our students. That's a big one. Is the scholarship that you see today for the MKC scholarship is not the same one that it was in 2005. There have been GPA changes, there have been mentor requirements added, there have been a bunch of different things changed based off of what we're hearing from students and what they need and their resources. And that's a big thing. The value of relationships and the value of listening have been huge, because it's taught us that philanthropy and scholarship giving is a two-way street. It's a two-way street. The family and I constantly have this conversation, and we try our best to let our students know with our actions and with our words that we are as fortunate for them to have them in our lives as they are for us. We get notes all the time. Thank you, Mrs. Weil. Thank you, Mr. Weil. Thank you, Matt, Kit, Caitlin, etc. Like, you guys have transformed my life, X, Y, and Z. And our response is like, no, you have. You have. Like, you've taught us grit and tenacity and what it's like to lose a parent in college, what it's like to grow up in the foster care system, what it's like to grow up homeless, right? All of us have had those life experiences. And so building these really deep relationships with students have given us access to a lot of information that researchers crave for, right? They're door knocking, they're trying to figure out these stories, and we have access to them. And we've used that as fuel to figure out how we can change the systems, right? The foster care system. I mean, I wish you guys could sit, and actually these two in front of us, Andrew and David, have sat in on one of our board meetings, and it turns quickly. It really turns quickly because you want to talk about issues of race, of racial profiling, of, there are a variety of homelessness, of foster youth. It turns quickly, and the family is always trying to figure out how to get to the root of the issue and how, as donors, leverage the resources that they do have, both social capital and general capital to solve these systemic issues. And so that's how the scholarship has changed our dialogue in the boardroom. All right. So I'm going to wrap up with talking a little bit about our alums. So this is a pitch stitch. Talk about millennials being up here. You would see a pitch stitch on a slideshow. So these are some of our alums, and one of the things that the Wheels have noticed in interacting with MKC scholars that have graduated is they keep on asking, like, what can we do for you? How can we give to you? You've given so much to us of your time, of your money. What can we do? And our biggest thing is like, hey, interview our students, mentor our students. You're in New York, great. So-and-so's in New York, and we try our best to match our students as much as possible. And these are just some fun pictures from some of the interactions. I love this picture of Mr. Weil because he hardly ever smiles. And, and this is him with Gloria, who's also part of the first class of MKC scholars and her first business card. So he's elated to be holding her business card. Mrs. Weil, we're big on FaceTime. If we're traveling to your city, we will show up and ask you to take you out to lunch. So this is Mrs. Weil I think she was on a museum tour, and she asked a bunch of different kids from the Claremont schools to meet up for lunch and just catch up. This girl right here, Angelica, went to Claremont McKenna. She ended up getting her certificate in event planning here at San Diego State. Again, a lot of connections to this campus, and is now working at a leadership institute up there that specifically works on nonprofit management, right? So again, full circle. We throw a lot of words around in philanthropy about leveraging your resources and collective impact and building a leadership pipeline. Well, this is it. It starts with relationships, and a lot of people don't want to go there, don't want to get into the messiness of getting into someone's heart, into someone's mind, into someone's life, because it's difficult and it's messy, and some of us don't even want to do it in our own lives, with our own selves, with our own families. How are you going to give that emotional vulnerability to a student? But that is what we've seen changes things, right? That's what we've identified as philanthropy. And so that's us. Again, I told you I have the coolest bosses in the world. And yeah, I will pass it over to Nate, who's going to tell you about the amazing work that he's doing.